All right. Hello, once again, everyone. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live June 6th, 2024. Pretty rusty. I am very rusty, and that will be evident tonight. So take it easy on me, chatters. I'm the schlub on the left, Chris Baker. You can find me on X at Sabres Prospects, that beautiful, handsome devil on the right-hand side. That is Matthew Fairburn, Sabres writer for The Athletic. You can find Matthew's coverage of the Buffalo Sabres and sometimes Buffalo sports in general at theathletic.com, best sports app in the business. Matthew, do you got the deal of The Athletic? Do you have it? I always throw this at you. As a good employee, you're expected to know. I think it's cheap. It's very affordable.
There's always something going on. If you find your way over there, you'll find a deal. I can't keep up with all the deals. That's outside of my pay grade, so I let the marketing folks handle that.
That's good answer. Good answer. Hey, before we begin, as people are trickling in, good numbers already. Wow. I think people may have missed us, or maybe there's nothing on TV, or the weather shitty outside. I don't know. Looked pretty nice before I shut these blinds. But if you could please, while you're here, like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please leave a 5-star review. That I'm not rusty with, but everything else, we're going to kick some rust off here for, I don't know, 45 minutes, an hour, depending on what the chat wants to do here. But Matthew, it's been a little bit. We haven't talked for over a month, man. I think the last time we talked was actually before the Lindy Ruff press conference, the formal introduction to the media for his second stint here as head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. We might want to get into that a little bit tonight. Other topics I think that we can delve into: NHL Combine, which is my favorite bullshit event on the hockey schedule, is kicking off in Buffalo this week. I have to get my tweet out. Every year I tweet Vince Vaughn on the rings with the smoke hanging out of his mouth as an early shot of the one of the very first NHL Combines. It definitely has evolved over the year. We'll talk a little bit about that and what you're going to be getting into there throughout the weekend down at Lecom Harbor Center. Maybe tee up some off-season stuff. We're going to ease our way back in because we're going to be fairly regular from this point on. We both needed a little bit of a break. I certainly did. I have been busy with some business interests, doing a lot of work travel. Things are getting a little wild. Rica. I did go to Costa Rica. My liver was ready to come back from Costa Rica. I was one of those guys at the resort. It was at an all-inclusive with my Yeti, just going up to the bar, just having them fill it up with tequila and whatever. It got to a point at like 2:30, 3 o'clock every day. I didn't care what they were mixing it with, as long as they were cutting it down a little bit with some water. But yeah, Costa Rica was good. But yeah, I came back, just dove right in. A lot of work travel. I was in Washington, D.C. earlier this week, got back last night. We're not going to talk about that, but I've been kind of globetrotting a little bit. So it's nice to actually be back in this chair with your smiling face on the right side of the screen. Matthew, what have you been up to before we kind of dive into some of the latest and greatest happenings, including a new head coach for the Rochester Americans, by the way? But tell the people what you've been up to here in this late spring.
Yeah, I was on parental leave for a few weeks. So if anyone was missing my byline at The Athletic or here on the YouTube channel, I was chasing the two kids around chasing the older kid around. The baby still, staying in one spot, but a little 2-on-1 that they've got going on, when it's just me there. So busy few weeks, certainly feeling refreshed in some ways and worn down in others. So ready to get back to, just taking care of business here and babysitting you instead here on the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show.
That's a good way to put it.
A little bit easier.
I do need a handler. I do definitely need a handler. So thanks for volunteering for that gig. But yeah, we're 22 days away from the NHL draft. Things are about to get real. Combine kicking in, like I already mentioned. For me, it's the interviews that really matter, getting to know the human being, kind of getting a feel for their, just how they see the game, how they see themselves as players, what they want to improve on, just their outlook on life. I don't get into a lot of the goofy questions. We'll hear some of those, I'm sure, creeping out through the media throughout the weekend. But let's kind of start to resharpen the skills here and just briefly touch upon some of the coaching changes that have happened in the Sabres organization since you and I were last together. So we'll talk a little bit about Lindy. You and I had an immediate reaction podcast, like I said, before his press conference, his reintroduction to the media. I was kind of wishy-washy. I kind of wanted to hear how Lindy was speaking as a little bit more of an elder statesman as an NHL head coach at this point in his career. We'll share some thoughts on that. Seth Appert was elevated from Rochester to Buffalo. I think we can kind of get into that. I think we both have thoughts on maybe what that means for the immediate as well as maybe long-term status of the Sabres bench down the road. But today I want to just touch upon real quick. The Amerks made a hire today of 36-year-old Mike Leone, who was a former player, really interesting journey, both as a player and now a leader of men as a head coach for the first time in the professional ranks. Former forward in the college ranks, played some D3. Most recently, he has a United States national team development program pedigree as an assistant, and then left the program to be a head coach for the USHL's Green Bay Gamblers for the past 2 seasons, I believe it was. And I'll share with you what I know about Leone, and I'm going to talk for a little bit because I have to just kind of get moving here, get the brain moving. This is going to be good for me. If the listeners are getting bored with it, tell me in the chat. I don't care. But Leone was definitely like a hardworking forward as a player. I remember him at Western Michigan. That's ultimately where he finished his collegiate career, late 2000s. Jeff Blashill recruited him. But this was a guy who played in the NAL, the North American Hockey League in Texarkana. They moved to St. Louis, played for that team there. And John Cooper was his coach in the NAHL. And hardworking, really hard-nosed, like a coach's player. And I'm not going to go deep on this because I don't have the knowledge base of him. I just remember him casually, but he was a guy that was just like a role player, didn't score a ton, was out there working in front of the net, really like a bulldog, tenacious type of player. Like I said, just like team guy. So when you hear Kevin Adams talk about identity of those bottom lines, this is the type of player that Mike Leone was. You see that reflected, watching the Green Bay Gamblers most recently. You kind of see his work ethic as a player reflected in his teams. Now, of course, he's going to say that stuff. A coach is going to say, we're going to be hard to play against. You know what I mean? Because that's coach speak now. You better say that. It's hockey. It's not a dancer's sport. It's very rare that a guy says, yeah, we're going to lean on our skill and just play purely a skill game, But I think that we should expect him to see that continue. Like, I think he actually lives it, believes it, and the other kind of thought on Mike Leone was his journey. Like, sometimes you have to, kind of have a harder road as a player or just as a human being. He definitely had it. He didn't have like a lot of tragedy in his life, but he had to work for every ounce of ice he got when he was a player. He wasn't a good student. He had a couple schools that he went through. He was not an academic at all. He had to go back to like JUCO, play in men's leagues before Blashill called him and brought him into Western. And, to see now where he is in his life as a professional in the workforce, I think that's kind of really interesting. Like, he had to really work hard. And like, I think that he can really relate to players and getting them to work hard because he's lived it. He's breathed it. He graduated from college where there was probably a point in his life when he was just like, couldn't even get a look for a D1 program when he was probably 17, 18, 19, as good of a player he was because he wasn't a good student. So I just think there's a lot there. There's a saying, I'm going to get the saying wrong, but it's like, life's a shit sandwich, but it tastes better like the more bread you have. And now he's going to get some bread, and I think he's earned that bread. And, but now he won't forget his journey, I think, to this point. 36, he's at a good spot. He's probably married his family, I'm certain. But at any rate, I just wanted to share what I knew about him. A lot of that may have already been, put out there in media reports or whatever. People have had a head start talking about this guy, but he's been an up and comer, respected in the coaching ranks. My immediate reaction was like, wow, it's still kind of early, but he must have really wowed Karmanos. And I'm assuming Kevin Adams had a say in this hire as well. And maybe they even talked to Seth Appert. But last thing I'll say, and I'll pass it over to you, the Cooper connection. So a little fun anecdote, totally true story. way back. I don't know the exact years. I'd have to go back and look at when John Cooper was hired into the AHL out of Green Bay. So John Cooper, his first professional job was with Norfolk. Before that, he was coach of the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL for, I think, 2 seasons, maybe more, right around. I don't think he had a very long stint there. He moved through the ranks pretty quickly. The Sabres had an amateur scout who then moved into pro scouting, but he wrote this like report for Sabres brass at the time, Darcy, basically making a business case for why the Sabres should take a look at bringing John Cooper into the organization as a American Hockey League coach. Probably what, 15, 18, I don't know. Again, I don't have my timeline mixed up. Time moves fast, but years later, are the Sabres taking corrective action here with the hire of Mike Leone? Maybe we'll find out in a few years down the road, but that's some parallels there. You're going to see that a lot, I think. You know, the Blashill, Lalonde, John Cooper connections. So you saw the news come out. Are you back, by the way, officially? Am I stealing
Yes,
you ahead of time? Or you're
I'm
back?
back.
Okay, you're back. Yeah, you're back.
I'm back.
Back. Okay.
The
What do you got on Leone?
what's interesting is you can look at a hire like this and think it's not, it's the AHL job. It's not the flashiest job opening or, you know, the most important hire in the organization. But I think the anecdote you just shared underscores how every little person, every hire that you make really does matter. And there's the on the ground, developing the prospects, trying to win in Rochester, all of those things. But you're developing coaches at the same time and trying to identify the next wave of coaching talent because we've seen in the NHL, I believe it's now 18 coaches in the last year that have been fired. These things happen fast. These coaching, you churn through coaches and guys are rising through the ranks. It seems like even faster. So what I like about Leone as a hire is that when you have that recent experience with the development program, recent experience in the USHL, it's another resource to tap into draft wise and scouting wise. And you can kind of, have some crossover there, which I think is important when they're building their team the way that they are. There's a comfort level with USA Hockey, obviously. I think there
Yeah.
were, you know, there were a lot of names people were wondering about. Maybe they would promote an assistant in Rochester or Jay McKee out of junior. But this one, was I'm okay with the hire. I like the background and I like the recent connection to some of these amateur players that are going to be coming into, potentially available in this draft or recently drafted as you're looking to, make trades or whatever. So that is appealing. We'll see what he's got. I mean, ultimately, coaching, every level you bump up, you have to reprove it. And this is especially true for a guy that is now, like you said, going to be leading men as a pretty young guy himself. That will be interesting. But when it comes to working with young players, knowledge of young players, and the development of those players, this guy has that track record. And I think that's what they had in Seth Appert and what they were trying to replace. So rather than just make an internal promotion, they went to try to add coaching talent to their pool, and we'll see what comes of it. It's all tied in, of course, to the promotion of Seth Appert, and we'll get into that. But a nice to at least have that job filled and get that checked off as they move through the offseason.
Yeah, I like your point about knowledge of some of these young players, not just like Artem Levshinov, who he coached at Green Bay before going to Michigan State, or, some of these other players from the USHL in this draft, whether it's guys in the program like EJ Emery, Cole Iserman, you name those guys, Teddy Stiga, or like John Mustard, players like that I like in this draft too. Like I'd be curious about his insight there. But no, that's a good point. My comment about is it early or not? I mean, that's not for me to decide, obviously. he was talked about a lot in the amateur hockey circles recently. So maybe it's a good time, get him maybe before someone else scoops him up. I'm not sure. It's going to be really curious to see. But, moving forward, he's going to have a really nice stable of players to work with in Rochester. Really good forwards. Noah Ostland's going to be there next year. I think Isak Rosane probably be back down there. We'll see what happens with Kulik. I'm pretty sure he's going to have Matthew Savoy down there. These are going to be really fun prospects for him to kind of tinker with and see what he could squeeze out of them. We saw Savoy this year, for example, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, even though we weren't on here talking, you and I were still talking quite a bit. Like with Savoy and, we saw with Sam Reinhart when he went back to Kootenai after being drafted, he wasn't putting up these crazy numbers. It's because he was working on all these other parts to his game to become complete and focusing on maybe, a lot of the off ice stuff in the weight room just as much as he was focusing on what he was doing on the ice. I think we saw a little bit of that this year from Savoy, but yeah, he's going to have a lot of talent there, man. He should have another really good team next year. So anyways, congratulations to Mike Leone, and get to work. Get to work. I think on behalf of Sabres fans, I say that. So he takes over for Seth Appert. So let's just talk about the Sabres coaching staff real quick before we kind of get into some other things. Should we start with Lindy or should we talk about Seth? Talk about him in tandem.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Seth, I guess, because when Lindy was hired, we were kind of talking about, what's he going to do with his assistants? And, first of all, let me just say in the big picture, because I was kind of non-committal that day that we were talking. I wasn't shocked, but I didn't know how I felt about Lindy being back. And really where I land on this is I think that this is that last card for Kevyn Adams to play. He either hits it big with Lindy or Lindy might be what makes him fold, but they had a lot of knowledge about Lindy. They have a lot of trust. It was an easy hire for Kevyn Adams to make. And, Lindy has a track record. There's no reason to think that he can't do well in this role, but it's in the bigger picture. I think Kevin had to go with someone he was really comfortable with. He wasn't going to take that chance because of the, win the hand and live to play a few more hands or fold. And, it kind of ties into the Appert hire on the bench, really, right? I think they're kind of, to your point, they are connected, but let's just stay on Lindy for a second, I guess, because he said a lot of things in that press conference. It's so far in the rearview mirror for a lot of the fans, but some of the takeaways I had from that, this goaltending, he went right to UPL first. I think when someone asked him about goaltending, because you got to remember he had like Noren and Marty Baron, Ryan Miller, he had this three-headed monster. And it seems like he feels maybe going into next season, his first in the second term here, Sabres head coach, said maybe he has a clearer picture. He said 3 letters, UPL. And I'm sitting there saying, does he? Because Devin Levi might be ready to kind of come in and make a pretty big push here. Levi was awesome in Rochester. He has to do it again in Buffalo. Obviously, it's a whole new slate coming back next season. But I thought that was kind of interesting because Lindy, he did say, and I kind of jotted it down, just about, he basically mentions that goaltending is the most important thing that every team needs. And I agree with him. He's got pretty good confidence in UPL. It's pretty clear. Now let's see what Devin Levi does when he comes back in, because I think you and I agree that Levi is kind of the guy. It's a UPL Levi tandem. We've talked about the dynamic of what happens with UPL, at least his mindset when he's the guy. He might not be the guy again next season. So that's going to be, for me, massive storyline coming into next season. I'm going to stop there because there's other things on Lindy that I want to talk about. But are you tracking with me so far on just kind of the bigger picture and maybe his thoughts about goaltending? I know they're divergent thoughts, but I'm going to pass it to you.
It was a big, talking to some colleagues in the media and, people downtown this week at the combine. There were some people wondering, like, are the Sabres going to be in that market for a veteran goaltender? And my thought was where you are. I think the tandem of Luukkonen and Levi, they've seen how messy the 3 goalies can get. So maybe you bring in a good AHL goalie with some experience that could bump up if an injury happens. You need that depth, but the way Levi played in Rochester towards the end of the season, the playoff experience he got, that to me is enough to put him there. But to your point, this is going to be interesting because not only did Luukkonen play his best when the team was his, that it seemed like he really caught fire when Levi went down to the AHL. And it was beyond just them giving him the net. It was Levi wasn't even there. So when Levi's there, that Swayman Ullmark dynamic that every team is searching for is hard to find. Two guys who really like one another, push one another, really healthy back and forth. That's not easy because all of these guys coming up are used to being the man. There's one net, and you don't get to the NHL if you're not used to being in that net all the time.
Takes
So,
maturity to support
yeah,
your fellow netminder.
it does. And these are still too young and somewhat, I mean, not going too deep into the psychology, but young and insecure as professionals, right? Because neither one has truly established himself. Luukkonen has a half season of excellent play. Levi has a couple of really good NHL games and some great AHL games. Neither one has gotten to the point of being able to feel truly secure in who they are. And so I think that dynamic plays a little bit better with Levi. He's just got I was watching the NHL playoffs and thinking a lot about Devin Levi because Ullmark and Swayman feels a little bit like a best case scenario for Luukkonen and Levi. Similar styles in a way, with Ullmark and Luukkonen and then Swayman to Levi. And Swayman's style translates to the playoffs where there's a lot of mess, there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of battling. That's Devin Levi. That part of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen's game, I don't think is
The
as good as
tracking, the
the tracking,
tracking.
the chaos, just
Yes.
rather than being the blocker, the see the puck, stop the puck, So it's going to be a really interesting dynamic. It is the number one domino that you're looking at, I think, with the offseason too, is Luukkonen's contract, right? And
Yeah.
what's interesting about Lindy bringing that up, it was actually sort of a tongue-in-cheek question from Paul Hamilton, who covered
Yeah.
Lindy years ago and probably, got on his nerves always asking who the goalie was. So he said it wouldn't be a press conference if I didn't ask you who your goalie was. But it is still interesting that that's the first thing that pops into his head, that because Lindy Ruff is not the coach of the Sabres if he had halfway decent goaltending in New Jersey. He knows how important it is because it's what got him fired. The
Yeah.
fact that they didn't have goalies there. So that will be interesting. What will that contract look like? And then what else do they do in net? Because we already saw how eager they are to get Devin Levi to the AHL or to the NHL,
To the
rather.
NHL. Yeah. Yeah.
They did it last season. How eager do you think they're going to be this season? Probably even more so, because here's the other thing. If we want to close the door on the goalie thing and sort of tie it back into Seth Appert,
A former
the
goalie.
the former goalie, yes, who I'll have a story in the next couple of days from some leftover reporting on something else I was working on. But Devin Levi loves Seth Appert.
I love when you open the
Yeah,
kimono about what's
yeah.
coming. I love that. I love when you
Huge
do that.
fan. Kevin Adams hiring Lindy Ruff. There was some, worry, I think, from some people that you used the word safe, I believe, when we first recorded.
Yeah.
Comfortable came to mind because there is some comfort there and knowledge of who this guy is. And the continuity on the coaching staff would lead one to believe that that did play a role, keeping some of the status quo, that Kevin Adams wasn't quite ready to say out with this entire staff. He wanted to keep Seth Appert. He wanted to keep, some of these coaches, maybe in different roles, but wasn't ready to tear it down to the studs. Tough, I think, for Don Granato to have to see that, it's like trying to isolate him as the main problem, because I don't think that's necessarily indicative of what happened last season. But the reason I tie it into the goalie conversation is a different coach might come in and say, I don't know if Luukkonen can repeat this. And if my only plan B is a kid who's never played a full NHL season, I don't like that. But Kevin Adams brought somebody in who clearly is willing to listen to his ideas and work with him because of their familiarity together, as evidenced by Seth Appert and the continuity on the coaching staff. So,
Safe.
all that to say, I'm feeling pretty comfortable thinking it's going to be Lukin and Levi, and I also don't mind it, by the way, because I think you can see around the league that the position is a tricky one, and you've got two good young ones. You want them to get the net. You want them to figure it out, and you have a guy that already did it last season. So that bet feels as good as burning cap space and wasting a roster spot on a free agent gamble, some of which in recent years we've seen spectacularly fail. Ottawa and Edmonton come to mind. So I'm okay with the young tandem. I just think as you read the tea leaves and you follow some of the patterns, you see that the comfortability of the hire was legitimate, I think, because some of the actions that have followed show you that.
I want it to be a tandem. Number one, I think Levi earned it. If you go back and I'm not going to regurgitate his stats that he posted in Rochester, but his stats were great. And from the eye test, he was on it. He was
How many
just
50 save
fabulous.
games did he have?
A lot, too many. That's
Multiple.
too many. He saw a lot of shots. He's the type of goalie that likes seeing a lot of shots, and he succeeded when seeing the volume of shots that he faced. I want these two young goaltenders to learn to coexist and push each other. Maybe it's wishful thinking. We talked about it takes maturity to make that happen for the betterment of the team. Tough shit guys figure it out. Luukkonen should feel pretty good from his season, his second half of the season that he had.
He'll feel pretty good when he looks at his bank account at the end of the summer, would be my guess.
He might. He might.
He won't feel bad. Whatever happens, even the ugliest scenario, right? It gets to arbitration or something like it. He's gonna get a raise, and so there'll be, I guess, some of the feelings could get messy. It's interesting because as you stack those contracts, look at what's happening in Boston, right? They're gonna have to.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a little breakup there of the bromance, and they're gonna have to find another answer, assuming they move on from Olmark. So as you start to forecast and stack those contracts together, that's where the Luukkonen piece is a big puzzle piece for that particular position as you try to piece together, because we know how they feel about Levi. Kevin Adams in particular feels that is, Devin Levi is the type of goalie that could be really special. And Luukkonen seems like he has to continue to prove and earn that same level of confidence. So it's a fun little storyline to follow this summer.
I love your comment about Luukkonen's bank account. I remember the videos probably, I don't know, 2016, 2017, something like that, training camp, Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart roll into the back of the arena on a tandem bike. And I was just thinking, yeah, Luukkonen gets a contract. He should roll up with Levi riding shotgun in his new Ferrari. I see him pulling up, Devin, get in, and where is that? I wish I had the soundbite. I don't have it handy. I'm not going to go there right now, but that would be cool. That would be actually a fun little thing.
The Luukkonen Levi dynamic is interesting because they didn't spend a ton of time. They haven't spent a ton of time together on the team, because if you think about when Levi came in, Luukkonen was at kind of a low point, I would think, is in terms of morale. He's kind of an afterthought. Craig Anderson's getting his send off. Devin Levi's getting every game. And Luukkonen is probably feeling pretty disenchanted with the whole thing. Then you go through training camp and they're fighting for a spot. Levi gets hurt, so he's kind of not on the ice every day, and then he gets sent down a little bit later. So they haven't really had that time to form what would, be a bond. They're two really different personalities, I feel like. I mean,
Yeah.
Devin Levi's different from most people. He's just, wired a bit differently.
Yeah, I don't want too many Devin Levi's on my team.
No, yeah, and, I mean, he's great. I've really enjoyed getting to know him, but same
I mean,
goes
I'm
for Luukkonen.
kidding.
They're
He's
just 2
great. Yeah.
different speeds, They're
Yeah.
they're they're
Yeah.
really, different guys, so that will be interesting to track. It's a little bit different than, when guys are established and have found themselves not just as players in the NHL, but, adults in the world. They haven't reached that point yet, so I'll be interested to see how they can grow together and Luukkonen can learn to, feel okay splitting the net. I think a contract might help there. Usually
I
you'd
think
say
you're
the
right.
opposite. A guy gets paid and you think, "Oh, now he's gonna be cutting corners," but I really do believe that Luukkonen is the type of personality. I said it, in training camp last year and leading up to the season that when he feels that you believe in him, that really helps him. So if the money might be enough to do it, even if Levi's there pushing him for ice time.
It's good that he's getting it done first. I think that's the case here, but that's a big, based on Lindy's comments and just, the importance of the position, the talent level that they have with these two young guys. That's definitely a big storyline that we'll be talking about in, 3.5 months or so. Or maybe even some time in between as well. A couple other takeaways just to shift gears from Lindy real quick. He talked about the old days. He mentioned that the team was 3 lines deep, but he also had some useful tools to lean into, like Ray and Mayer and Peters. And, of course, you're going to hear toughness in that, with those 3 names, but that's not maybe necessarily in the takeaway in this modern game. To me, it screamed more of guys that, um, the types of players that I think he sees that need to be injected into this group. And there's some of the names that we've talked about on maybe the last couple episodes that we had in April. Some of those guys that are hard to play against, whether it's a Scott Lawton or a Dakota Joshua, a Ryan Lomberg, players like that. That was the biggest thing. It just screamed like that veteran energy and that leadership. Um, I don't know if you had a takeaway on that as well, but I mean, we've talked about it ad nauseum. We maybe would be beating a dead horse by spending a lot of time on it, but I jotted it down because I was glad to hear him say that. It's something that we talked about that was missing from this team, whether it was getting to the net with consistency, playing big, defending teammates, not necessarily going out, dropping gloves and, fighting, but just playing hard, defending your ice, defending your space, just, playing big. Um, you're aligned,
Getting
I'm pretty sure on that.
getting to the net, as I've had some time to just be removed from the season, watch a lot of playoff hockey, watch these teams that are playing really well and peaking at the right time, talking to other people, kind of disconnecting from the Sabres orbit and talking to people, getting to the net. Like it seems so it's where so many goals are scored in the NHL. Yeah, especially in tough games, like when it matters. And so, yeah, hitting, great, edge, all those things. The number one trait though is getting to the net and being able to score goals from in front of the net. And I think those traits are coexist together often. I think they come as part of a package usually that guys that are willing to hit are the guys that are willing to get to the front of the net. Not all the time. Sometimes it's a skill, Zach Benson had right away, right out of the gate. He knows how to find those areas in front of the net and make plays, but it's a trait that I think they need to be looking for in the forward group. Noteworthy that Lindy Ruff mentioned it because as we do talk about Kevin Adams going with somebody who makes him feel comfortable and maybe isn't such an outside voice that he's going to challenge him often, that is an area where I feel like Lindy Ruff is going to be very clear about what he needs. He's going to have a really strong idea about who those players are. He's been coaching in the league, advanced scouting for a long time, very familiar with these guys that are going to be available and who might fit, and probably has a decent chance to attract some of those guys. Maybe even if it's somebody in a trade who, he's either has familiarity with him. It's just a different look when a guy is looking at Buffalo and saying, well, Lindy Ruff is there. Not saying it's going to fix everything, because I think there's going to be whatever progress they made 12 months ago where people were feeling a little better about what was going on in Buffalo. I don't think they're going to get any benefit of the doubt. They're going to have to overpay to get guys in free agency. They're
Yeah.
going to get some quick no's on no movement clauses, as they try to make trades. But I think Lindy Ruff could help a little bit. It's different than only leaning on guys who have played for Don Granato, for instance, right? Or last year, you look at the free agent signings they made. Connor Clifton played for Don Granato. Eric Johnson was childhood buddies with Kyle Okposo. That's a narrow line of connections that you're working with compared to Lindy Ruff, who has been around and has a little bit of gravitas and maybe commands some of the respect, bring some respect back to the organization that still has a lot of room to, grow in terms of the, damage they've done to their reputation, but it's not nothing. So an encouraging sign that he went right there, because I think everybody can see it, and they have the roster spots. There's an opportunity. You have roster spots. It's kind of a luxury. You don't always have that. Last year they had the roster spots and they kind of blew it. They brought back Tyson Jost. They brought back Zemgus Girgensons. They brought back Kyle Okposo. You had these spots open to change things up, change the flavor, and kind of just went status quo. Didn't find a way to get rid of Victor Olofsson. Now Victor Olofsson's an unrestricted free agent. Zemgus Girgensons is an unrestricted free agent. Kyle Okposo's gone. Tyson Jost is an unrestricted free agent. Eric Robinson is an unrestricted free agent. Eric Johnson is gone. So, there's a lot out there now that you can play around with. Maybe that means one of the young guys gets a spot, but you're not just plugging the 2022 draft class right in there. You're making one of them earn it. You're leaving maybe a sliver of wiggle room for one of them to earn it, and you're going to get the guys that Lindy's talking about that can give him different options in his lineup to really have those tools that he talks about. You want to be 3 lines deep. You don't want your third line to be a bad imitation of your first line. You don't want your fourth line, especially, to be that. You want some identity. You want roles. We talked about that a lot during the season. There was just a murkiness with roles for a lot of these guys. I think that's going to be more clearly defined under this coach, and I think that's going to be that alone. I think is going to be a big help.
The only other thing I wrote down from Lindy, and by the way, you're on it, dude. You're like, you missed this. I could tell. You're ready to go.
Doing a lot of talking this week about this.
I love
team.
it. Keep going, man. I love it. I love it. To save some for the rest of the offseason. But no, it's great. It's great stuff. You're bringing it. It's kind of funny too. I wrote down just the analytics piece. Lindy was talking about analytics a little bit, which makes sense because, kind of the godfather of modern day analytics was on Lindy's staff with Corsi, Jim Corsi. He was charting, the shot attempts and individual battles won and lost and things like that when he was here. So I think that made a lot of people happy. But Lindy mentioned that word accountability too, and I'm kind of getting sick and tired of that word actually, because it's a kind of a no shit concept in team sports. And you just want to kind of see it now, but the note that I made on it, it's kind of a weird, maybe a strange way to segue into Seth Appert a little bit, kind of in a very weird way. But, all those names that you just mentioned that are leaving the organization, presumably, Olofsson, Jost, Okposo's gone, all those guys, it made a young team even younger, right? And they have all these openings right now. And, I think the reason that you're talking about accountability is a lot because of how young the team was. And, all these young guys were coming up through junior, youth hockey junior. They were always the man. Some of them have to shift their mindset a little bit now for the betterment of the team. And, it kind of leads me into that thought process of, it's all the more reason to keep all these young guys down as long as you can and keep them humble and make them team players. And of course, it's more time to develop their games. And it kind of makes me wonder if, with Seth Appert moving on and giving those guys a new coach, like with Appert being up in Buffalo, is he a good like he'll be there when those young guys are ready. But I almost wonder with him being in Buffalo now, and if some of those guys like a Kulik has to go back down, Rosane and Savoy doesn't make it, does it make it easier to send him down? Knowing Seth can kind of talk to him on the way down, just coming from that organization. See where I'm going with that? Like, that's not why Seth Apper was elevated, obviously, but it's a thought because, like I said, that word, I'm just kind of tired of the word. I want those guys to be fully ready. And I'm not sure any of those guys are going to be fully ready to make the team full time out of camp. I think a lot of those guys will be ready to get looks and stay deep and, take a run. I mean, then again, Zach Benson, who would have thought this, that he was fully ready. But I don't know, like, because Granato had some commentary about that word too, right?
Yeah, I
Accountability
keep
and
going back to that, and I agree with him because I came out of locker cleanout thinking the same thing you're thinking about accountability being a weird buzzword for the week, and Kevin Adams was the first to use it. I think there was some parroting happening once a few of the older guys went with it, that it started to
yeah,
just become the easy thing to say. But I think I mentioned when we spoke, you don't want these guys thinking they just hit the coach button. You know, in life, in anything that you do, accountability, to say somebody is craving accountability, as Kevin Adams did, that these players are ready, they're craving accountability, doesn't totally square. Because if you're craving it, you would either provide it in the form of vocal leadership in your own locker room, because we know that those locker rooms, it's not just the coach, pushing and pushing buttons in there. So there's that piece, but also do it. The guys that are like, we need to practice harder, we need to do this. That is all within your control. And that was sort of Don Granato's point to me when we spoke was, are you an accountable person or do you want to be punished? Do you want to be punished? Because I mean, that would come off that would sound a little strange to say. I really want to be punished is what I
yeah.
want.
I want a Dom coach.
We
Yeah,
want guys, but Tage Thompson did say like we want guys need to be benched or stuff like this. But once it's you that's being benched, I think as I've thought more about it, what it really boiled down to by the end, these guys all love Don Granato, or maybe not all to a man. I'm sure there's guys that had certain feelings, but these guys
I'm not
had a
sure
lot of
Vic loved him. Yeah,
right. Like these guys had a lot of
yeah.
care for their coach. A lot of these guys that were talking about accountability and talking about these things, being ready for a change, they care about this guy. They liked him as a coach. But what I think they need is what I was talking about with Lindy brings that respect, gravitas. I think they needed somebody that they felt like I think they just lost a little bit of faith in the leadership and lost, I don't know if lost respect, not lost respect for the man, but maybe lost respect for the direction that things were going. And now they have somebody that they feel like they can put that faith that they're willing to follow and that will probably hold them accountable and they will be okay with it because Don Granato did try to coach guys hard. He did bench a guy here or there, take ice time away here or there. It's not as if it was completely lacking, but when it's the guy that was handing out ice time a couple years ago to try to build up everybody's confidence again, for the same guy to then start to bench you, and he doesn't have the track record that somebody like Lindy Ruff does, that's where I think it was missing. I think the accountability is really the wrong way to explain what they want. That a lot of that's gonna come from within themselves too.
Well, that's my point. So I did a horrible, like, I'm glad that you were tracking with what I was trying to say and I teed it up, but I didn't do a good job, I think, explaining my thought. But I think you're helping me kind of shape it better to articulate it. Like, Sabres have all this young talent. They have these openings. And that's not the way that they're going to have to build their team next year. That's why I'm saying, that's why I was mentioning like keeping the guys down. Don't be afraid to keep those guys down. As you're paying more guys, you're going to need some of those prospects to break through that glass ceiling and be up there on the roster making, $1 million or whatever it is. You're going to need those guys. But we talked about this in March, April, when we were talking. I'm not sure they have a captain. I'm not sure the answers are in the room. All the more reason that you got to go out, get veteran leadership, You got to go shopping. You got to get the right players, bring them in from the outside. And that's the way that you're going to get the accountability in the room, because it's not like these guys are going to go away for the summer, golf, be on their boats, come back, and then, oh, yeah, we're accountable.
Right.
If that's truly what they need.
Punish me. I'm
Yeah.
ready. I'm ready to
Yeah.
be held accountable. It doesn't work like that. And that Don Granato brought that up a few times at the end of the season. It was like, I can only hold guys accountable so much as I have players to hold them accountable with. You know, you can
Yeah.
take away Jeff Skinner's ice time only when JJ Peterka is ready to take it, right? Because think about how quickly that gets old. If you say, a lot of people said, well, scratch Jeff Skinner and call up Yuri Kulik. Cool. Good idea on the surface. What if it doesn't work? What if Kulik's not ready and he looks no good? What does the rest of the room think? Okay, you're not, go ahead and try pulling my ice time. You know, who else you got? That, you know, that's part of building that depth, that organizational internal competition. Just look at the way it naturally played out with Luukkonen and Levi, and the way those two in their own way indirectly push one another. And I think you could see it even with a guy like Paterka having to earn that top, you know, that top line spot, and then was much more ready for it than he would have been had they just handed it to him. So that is why it's on Kevin Adams more than anybody to help make this team more accountable in many ways, with guys that do it, play the way that you're talking about, get into the net, getting, you know, into the corners and forechecking hard and hitting people, occasionally dropping the gloves, maybe, you know, yelling at guys in the room or on the ice, pushing guys in that way, leaders that have been there and done that, but also who just are going to try to be taking your ice time, right? And making internal competition. That's really where you get the best accountability. And that's built over time. That's not pushing a button. So that's why I just didn't love the messaging in that way from they're ready for accountability. They're ready for something different. I agree with that. They're ready for a different voice. They're ready for more pedigree maybe, and you know, somebody that can really show them the way. More accountability is a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of layers,
Yeah.
and to your point, pushing the prospects down, uh, you know, that's it almost has to happen because you cannot get younger. And Seth Appert should help with that. I think Seth Appert, you know, one of his strengths is sort of, I mean, he's a couple years covering the league. I have not met too many people who love hockey as much as Seth Appert does.
Yeah.
Like the guy, I mean, all these guys do to an extent, but this guy loves being at the rink, and it's contagious. It's contagious to me. You know, I don't play for him, but it's like I'd go up to Rochester and be more excited about hockey than I was when I got there after I talked to him. And whether that was Yuri Kulik, Isak Rozan, or a guy like Devin Levi who gets sent down, a guy like Tyson Jost, you know, people forget that he had to deal with a wide range. It's not like he spent all his days just coaching up Rozan and Kulik. He really had to deal with a wide range of personalities, meeting guys where they are in terms of, you know, Riley Stillman was down there. He didn't want to be down there. You know, that a lot of guys like that. So, you know, the ability to relate is huge, and the ability for the built-in familiarity with those prospects who may be heading back down will be nice. It'll be a nice asset. It'll be different than it's it's why I don't really blame Kevin Adams for this. Feels like a little bit of a half measure, right? The coaching changes that they made. You get the change at the top. You get a lot of continuity. The real change is a guy that was already in the organization. But they are not the type of franchise, given where they've been the last 13 years, that gets necessarily the benefit of the doubt from, let's say, a Kulik if he gets sent down. at what point does frustration start to bubble up? But if you
Yeah.
have the familiarity, the same voices, the people that he trusts, I think that can matter. So I don't mind it, and I think Seth is a coach worth keeping around because of his potential, down the road.
He's a good bridge. I like that he's up. He's got a lot of work to do if he's going to get some action on the power play and things like that, try to fix that. I like the bridge aspect. He's got a lot of familiarity with all these players that we agree are talented and are going to come in. Even the guys that aren't in Rochester yet, or he didn't spend a lot of time with Noah Ostlund, but he had enough of a relationship between development camp and things like that, where I think he's going to be a good bridge, and he's in Buffalo when they're ready. And let's take it back to Leone for a minute. Some of those guys that may have to stay down a little bit longer, they're going to get a fresh look. And that different voice can maybe benefit their development, give them another angle, some just new messaging, a new way of communicating. That could be a positive. But I think that, we're always very kind of trigger happy to get the young guys up. It's not going to be the right move here. I think they're there in the on deck circle, give them some, action when you need them. There's always injuries. That bench strength in the organization, I think, is going to be critical next year, but they gotta, for all the reasons, I don't want to repeat everything we just said in the past 15, 20 minutes. Big off season, shopping wise, trade wise. I think the market's there to make some moves, and we'll see what they do. Because we can talk a little bit about, the draft coming up and just sprinkle, we can kind of get into that a little bit, but because that's going to be really interesting too. You know how I feel about that pick and what they're going to do, or what I think they should do. Unfortunately, what sucks is that I think everyone else in this town feels that way with the draft pick of what they should do at 11. But I don't know if I want to go there right now, because that became the very vogue opinion.
Very quickly.
Trade the pick. Very quickly. But
we
it's
got
also
we got a little ahead of it. It was like the season wasn't even over yet, and we were talking about trading the pick.
We did, but no, we can get there. I guess you know what's interesting though. Like, I think Savoy. I mentioned this to you today, and I'll just say this, and I'm kind of all over the place. Like I said, I'm rusty, so just kind of deal with it. But you look at Savoy, Ostland, Kulik, and two thoughts, and you can comment on them if you want. But I still think that Noah Ostland's going to be the most effective of the three in the NHL. Surprisingly, maybe to some, because he's complete. 200-foot player. You can use him in a lot of situations earlier in his career. He's just advanced that way. Good enough playmaker. Just get bigger, stronger. Still looks like a little bit of a Bambi out there at times, but they'll work on that. And then at what point do we start throwing, because everyone just wants to talk about those three. At what point, actually now, from here on in, you better start talking about Anton Wahlberg and that group of players. Wahlberg's legit. And he fits the mold of what all these things that we're talking about, like playing big, getting to the net, working hard, maybe helping drag other people into being accountable. He's not a big ass kicker or anything like that, but he plays the game the right way. We got to start talking about him a lot more than I think we have historically on this podcast and just in the Sabres community in general, because that kid's not going away. He's going to be moving up through the ranks. They're going to have a hard time keeping him down. We're talking about keeping these guys down. That's the one player based on the role that he projects to fill that I think is going to crash through that ceiling quicker than a lot of people might be able to realize. And you're saying, Chris, what are you saying? You just said keep the guys down as long as possible. I get it. I hear myself talking. I'm just saying, let's start throwing Wahlberg into that mix right now. Let's treat him like a former first-round player. And, well, they wanted him to be number one, but he's young, big, and pretty mature game.
What's interesting about Wahlberg is part of what makes it hard to forecast how quickly Savoy, Kulik, Ostlund get to the NHL is that there's not a lot of those spots that make sense for
roles that they
Wahlberg's
fill.
role, they need it. So when he's ready, presuming they don't totally, whoever they fill out the bottom six with this summer, I don't know that it's going to be, long-term commitments, but you seem to always have one or two of those roles available every summer, or injuries, whatever. So that's where it's easier to see him getting there, and we've talked about Poltapov as well in a similar vein is,
Oh,
you know,
baby.
his KHL contract has 1 more year, I think,
One
but it's
more,
like
one more.
he's
Yeah.
not, probably I think a lot of times, of course, you're not gonna spend like a top 5 pick or a top 10 pick on a bottom 6, a guy that projects to be a bottom 6 player. You're trying to shoot for the moon on the potential, but in the prospect world, it can be easy to just fixate on that when you're really trying to layer your pool and round things out with different skill sets so that, yeah, maybe that speeds up the timeline of a Poltapov or a Wahlberg
Yeah.
because you need
The
those
role they
players
can project. Yeah.
and not that it's an easier role to transition into, but if you have the proper people around them, you can do it. It's like go out there, play hard, play your game, do what you do. It'll take some adjustment to deal with the man strength of the NHL, but if they're already hardwired to be playing that way, that's 80% of the battle. So I think it's like I don't know. Go ahead.
I get excited talking about those too because Wahlberg and Poltapov are 2 guys I could see playing opposite each other on wings, find the right centerman for him. It's a hard driving guy. They're probably like third line guys, to project, and that'd be a hell of a third line if they hit the potential that I see in them at their still very early parts of their career. They're cutting their teeth, figuring things out still. But man, I get excited thinking about that. Those are 2 mules. And a lot of people aren't familiar with Poltapov. Maybe they just see the stats and are like, he's not doing much. Well, he's playing on a veteran team. That's just how it goes in Russia sometimes. But man, the eye test is there. Rambunctious, got really good carrying speed with the puck. He's got a heaviness to his game, not shy. I just love the look of that, man. But I could drone on about him all day.
I'll say this about the
Let's
11th pick as we
Yeah, please do.
discuss trade, all these. Absolutely, it should be available in trade. By all accounts, it is available, or it's being talked about. They're doing the due diligence that you would expect them to do. If Kevin Adams is not asking what he can get for that pick, then frankly, remove him from the job now. Right? That's the job. He should be shopping that pick. Interesting though is that New Jersey is also shopping 10. I don't know if the two impact one another, but it is right in front of the Sabres pick. They're looking for something different than the Sabres are, but there's only so many buyers, only so many teams that actually want the pick. I don't think you should, you know, like you said, it became the trendy take, right? Trade the pick. Forget
It
it.
got annoying. It got
Just trade it.
annoying all of a
And
sudden because
I
the
am
people who I
sitting
think always have shitty takes were the ones that were jumping on that train. I was like, "Ah, man, now it's
I'm
not gonna
sitting
happen."
here trying to rein it in and think, well, you don't just trade it to trade it, right?
Yeah.
Like
No, no.
there's only there has to be a bar. There has to be a certain level of player that you're getting back because we were talking about this earlier. The pick doesn't necessarily diminish in value after you make it, provided you don't screw it up, right? Of course, the pick is a little bit more valuable when whoever it is can target the specific guy that they want. But if you nail it 6 months from now, that's still a player you can move and get something for, or closer to the season. Or what I also think about with the pick is you can make it and trade somebody else.
Mhm.
There's options here. By all means, you know, I will not be criticizing them if they move it. But I don't want to set the stage to be like, you got to move it. And so then whatever deal they make, it's like, well, good thing that they moved it.
No,
They
you
did
don't
it.
have to. Yeah, the
So it's like
position.
you
Yeah.
can't paint yourself into a corner. And I do wonder if the rest of the league is viewing the Buffalo situation and viewing Kevin Adams as a desperate general manager, and viewing them as a desperate team. And that is where Kevin Adams is really going to show what he's made of this summer because they have a lot. If you removed a lot of the variables from the equation and just took their roster, their prospect pool, the whole thing, there's a lot of teams, a lot of fan bases that would be pretty excited to be in this spot with the roster. But there are moves that need to be made. And if you make the wrong ones, the whole thing can go topsy-turvy pretty quick. And all this promise can turn into another reset. So that's where you just don't want to be viewed as the desperate guy that needs to get rid of that pick or needs to do something this year because, your job's on the line or whatever. But that's the fine line, I guess, between urgency and desperation that Kevin Adams is going to need to figure out, because he hasn't been nearly desperate enough in his tenure so far. So
Well,
that's, something that we'll see. I guess we'll see how he handles it.
the take was always rooted in just making it available because, the Sabres have historically been a team that has to draft, develop, and promote from within, just the market that they're in, the playoff drought. There's not a lot of good, it's not this crazy, awesome destination league wide. So the thought is, when you pick high as a Sabres organization, go out and get the best young talent that you can. The point was make it available. That making it available, putting it in play is radical if you're the Buffalo Sabres. Where I started to get annoyed on Twitter or just wherever, listening to the radio or whatever, was like, you have to do this. It's a failure if you don't do it or something. It was just like tunnel vision, getting locked in. It's like when my dog wants to go, piss on a stop sign, like gets locked in and drags me there. It's like, that's how I felt people were with that. Like, you got to trade it or you're not doing your job. No, it's not. Explore it and you got to use it, because I still think it's actually a good piece of currency. A lot of people don't. Now, if the Sabres do make a pick at 11, I did a little bit of research. I did like 5 minutes of research tonight. I went through the Sabres history of what they did with the 11th pick. They've actually got some pretty serviceable NHL players. Most recently, they picked 11th in 2002. They picked defenseman Keith Ballard out of the University of Minnesota. He was traded in July of 2003. I think that was in that Drury trade. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, because I know he went to Arizona with Reinprecht, or got Reinprecht in return. I think they sent Reinprecht out and got dragged. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I might be making that up. Before that, but Keith Ballard played 604 NHL games. Not bad. Pretty decent career. He was like a puck-moving defenseman in college and didn't really materialize fully into that, but definitely serviceable. 1992, this was the one dud. They took David Cooper, another defenseman out of Medicine Hat. He played 30 games in the NHL, all with the Toronto Maple Leafs. 1983, the Sabres chose Adam Creighton out of the Ottawa 67s, 708 NHL games. Big forward, lengthy, long arms, long legs, big centerman, good on draws. My favorite one was in 1979. So this is like way before Matthew Furbird's time. You weren't even a thought in your father's epididymis yet. 1979, Mike Ramsey. 1,070 NHL games, Miracle on Ice. That number 5 should be hanging in the rafters. It's kind of a travesty that it's not. And then 1974, here's a trivia question for the chat. Sabres chose Lee Fogelin, a defenseman from the Oshawa Generals. He played 924 NHL games. He was a captain of the Edmonton Oilers before Gretzky took over that C, played on all those Edmonton teams. But there's a piece of trivia with Lee Fogelin that, if anyone gets it, what's the significance of the Sabres drafting Lee Fogelin in 1974? I want to see if anyone gets it. And while we're chewing on that, so I guess, look, they made the pick 5 times at 11. 4 of those 5 were defensemen. There's a lot of defensemen in this draft. The hard time I have with this draft is figuring out when that run is going to start on defensemen. When is Caden Lindstrom going to go? Health issues. It's not going to drop very far. You see him all over the place. I worry about that kid's health. But man, I don't worry about it. Like, when he's healthy, if he's healthy, I do not worry about him as a player. The skating and the power, I like him. People want to talk about hockey sense. I don't care, because he kind of represents a lot of the things that we talk about. He would fill a need in the prospect ranks in terms of the Wahlberg down the middle with the size and the power. But So many variables. We're going to talk about that because, we have a couple weeks still to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the draft. We're just scratching the surface today. No one in the chat has gotten the Lee Fogel insignificance yet. I'll give it a little more time. But any thoughts on that before we go into the chat?
We had a staff mock draft of the full first round that has not yet published. I think we actually just wrapped it up in Slack today. I took a defenseman at 11.
Ooh, can I guess?
Somebody
Or
who
do you want to blow it?
you can guess. I feel like I might have told you when I was on the clock. Maybe I didn't. I was going back and forth with Scott Wheeler when I was on the clock, but I feel
Did
like
you
I
take a
told you.
Western League defenseman?
No, I did not.
Oh, by the way, I think Zeev Buium's going to fall. I think
There's
Dickinson.
one of the defensemen's going to fall.
Yeah.
So
see, here's the thing, by the way, like in the consensus, I think I love Dickinson.
that was my guy. Now
Okay.
everybody listening has to promise to click so that I haven't spoiled the mock draft. But that he was there and it was hard. I think people who were listening might know. Actually, no, probably not. Actually, we didn't do a show after the lottery, but we did the same exercise after the lottery.
I remember.
With just the lottery teams, and I took Cole Iserman, and he was also on the board in this version of the exercise, but Dickinson was on the board this time, and he wasn't the first time, and it felt like you take the best player that's available, but also I'm interested to get your take on this. Do they have to not draft, one of these smaller, speedy forwards? Like one of them
Like
could
Berkeley
fall.
Catton. Yeah,
He's the one
Catton's probably going to be there. I like Catton. My dream scenario, honestly, at 11, if we're just going to kind of go a little bit deeper on the draft, it's not going to happen, okay? Because he had too good of an under 18s. But if TJ Ginla, the way that kid projects, would be perfect. Perfect for what they need.
Calgary, a couple picks in front of Buffalo might
Yeah,
make
but they've shown us that they don't always have it together to make the
Right.
obvious pick and do the obvious thing. That would be ideal. But no, I mean, like Catton is a great player. He's more of the same.
And at some point, you can't just sit there and do it every time, right? I got it with Benson. I totally understood it. It's like this guy's fallen too far, and even though he's small, he doesn't really play small. All that I understood. But at some point, what we're talking about with roles, you can't think you're getting the market inefficiency every time, right? At some point, you need to get some of these other traits, the size, and I mean Lidstrom, if he were there, that was a guy that throughout the winter, as I started watching, really loved his game just because he's so much of what the Sabres are missing. So that's a wild card. If he's
I have
there,
health concerns with him, though. Okay,
if he's
I don't
there, that's
see him.
probably what it is, right? That's the only reason he would be there at 11, and then you're really raising the red flags. Is like, okay, if he's there.
But then you have two crazy skilled forwards that are supposed to fall if that's the case, because Cole Iserman should not fall out of the top 10. I don't care what people say. I think the
seems
warts are getting a little too overblown.
I agree.
That scoring skill should not drop past like 8. I don't care. The shot, I get the skating. I don't care. I think because if he can play, I understand the concerns, but it's a concern to not keep him in the top 3 where he was in the consensus coming into his draft year. The fact that he's fallen that much blows my mind, but I could be wrong, and I probably will be, just because the league gets pretty crazy. But then that would put Iserman and Lindstrom both on. See, Lindstrom, he's not like Sam Bowie going way back in the NBA draft, or Greg Oden. Like, these guys were injured and like it was obvious, like they had crazy injuries. It's not that level, but I still have I have concerns. Now, if you get him to 11, okay. Like, I have concerns if I have the 4th pick and he's there. I have fewer concerns if you can get him at 11. It's no different than when everyone said Grigorenko can't really skate, but you still take him at 12 in case he can.
Right.
And the Sabres did.
Well, that's the thing with the Sabres too, is they're so deep in the prospect ranks that if they don't trade the pick, you're sitting there and saying you have the luxury to take a chance, to be the team that says, well, if he stays healthy and the back's not that big of a problem, we have a star. Or if Cole Iserman can play away from the puck a little bit, we've got a superstar. That's appealing to me. The flexibility that you have with this draft pick, including trading it, but that's one of the luxuries you get when you have such a deep, talented prospect pool, is you can use that to be the team that, and that, it comes up with the Russian factor sometime. I don't think it's super relevant in this draft. I think teams are more comfortable than they were a couple years ago. It's not as much of a wild card, but that was like with Michkov last year. It's like, well, if he falls, if nobody wants him, you can take the swing. You just had 3 first rounders the year before. If you
And that
miss,
was
you miss.
crazy too, him
Right.
falling.
And he
Like,
didn't.
that was crazy too.
And he didn't. That's why,
Yeah.
maybe Lindstrom doesn't. I don't think Dickinson will. I was surprised he was there in our version of the mock draft, especially after the Memorial Cup. I made the pick before the Memorial Cup, so I don't know if that factored in at all, but
Well, he did get beat in one of those games bad, like where a guy split him and his partner. And I'm not going to put that on Dickinson. I can see the play in my head, but look, I think for me, he's like one of my favorite defensemen. I have a couple like takes on the draft. Like, I saw Levshinov a lot this year watching Sturbach, and I get the appeal. 6'3" righty, offensive. Dude, his defensive game has to come around for him to live up to if he goes 2 or 3. Dickinson, I feel more comfortable with his core competency as a defenseman. Love Dickinson. He's like, people are gonna like, it's not the right time to say Owen Powery, but like, because like people are maybe not as excited about Owen Power as maybe they should be in the long term. I see a little bit of that though. But the Levshinov thing, I get it. I would be very cautious, like very early. And I don't know, we'll see. There's a lot there. The tools are there, but man, the off the puck stuff, the defensive zone stuff, I saw so many areas of concern for him. He was a young player, though. He was a freshman playing NCAA. Got a lot of ice time, but he was very much one way too many nights. The body and everything else. So man, if you could just coach a little bit more D into him, at the end of the day, it could end up being a home run. He's got to want to do it. But
that's
you
how,
got to remember too, these players aren't fully baked. You know what I mean? You're still developing them. It's like with Iginla. My thing with Iginla is like where he projects 3 or 4 years. You see it up here, see it with the skills, But go ahead, man. Sorry.
It's why we'll probably get into a whole separate discussion on Iserman at some point, but it's why I come back to him. And Scott Wheeler's probably sick of hearing me ask, like, what the hell's going on? Like, what, and why do you really, like, this guy's really going to fall? Like, and I really shouldn't be like, mocking him to the Sabres here at 11. You think he's going to fall even further? So he is dropped. But when you can shoot the puck like that, you talk about stuff you can coach into guys. That's one that you really can't. And so, I mean, you can a little bit, you can develop it, but I'd rather it be where it's at with Cole Iserman. So I don't know. It's going to
He's
be,
a pure
it's gonna
goal
be an
scorer.
interesting draft. Right. Like, and 6 months ago, 8 months ago, whatever, people would think this is crazy that he's potentially available at 11. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting spot to be in the draft, and maybe it becomes a more attractive pick. And there are teams that don't have picks in the first round. There's, teams that maybe want to move up. We'll see. But sometimes the trade activity on draft night itself is a little underwhelming, but maybe Kevin Adams can swing something ahead of time, or he sits there and makes the pick and it's another player in the pool that then you can move somebody else.
I'm going to hit the chat real quick on some of these since we're talking about Iserman, because he's going to be very polarizing as evidenced here by David Deet saying Oliver Wahlstrom would like a word. Oliver Wahlstrom could not even pass the puck like Cole Iserman could pass. People talk about the shooting, but you got to remember Iserman could actually, he could really move that puck around, thread needle, and find his teammates as well. It's not always reflected in his stats, but you gotta watch him. I like him a little bit better than some of his ratios might suggest. don't trade the pick till the pick is on the clock. You're going to get some of that. Yeah, I mean, you got to have some, deals, at least conceptually, in line contingencies. I think they'll be doing that. Let's see. No one's gotten the Lee Fogelin yet. Was Fogelin the first American-born player that the Sabres took in the first round? Cummings is the closest. He was the first American-born player taken in the NHL draft in the first round, 1974. So Cummings was pretty much right there. Pronman, someone writes, it's Cummings again. It's just like the old days. We're going to Cummings a lot. Corey Pronman mocked Ginla to Buffalo in his latest for The Athletic. That'd be amazing. I think that'd be a really good pick. Other than that, I don't know if you see anything. A lot of love for Mike Ramsey in the chat. Always good talking about Mike Ramsey. Love Mike Ramsey. Draft the next version of Mike Ramsey.
There's some Skinner buyout debate in the chat.
We're doing this again.
We've had the. I think we're both, pretty clear on our stance on Skinner.
Throw it up though if you see it, because I want to see what's. Are they yelling at each other or are they yelling at us?
No, I mean, we didn't bring up Skinner, so.
Yeah, that doesn't mean they won't yell at us though.
But they're yelling at each other. I'm trying to find the origin of the Skinner debate, but I'll just throw up.
Is Cummings banging his head off the desk? Is he bleeding? This is his favorite conversation too, I believe.
James has the measured take, and Phil says, Skinner's a nice personality, but really not what we need. I say take the hit while you can afford it. I kind of agree with Phil.
I think go out and get a top flight forward, move Tuck down to play opposite Skinner on the third line with Scott Lawton as your centerman. There you go. Offseason done.
Well, depends what Scott Lawton costs, right? If he costs 11, maybe that's a little too rich. Maybe that's where we talk about, having to rein in the expectations, I guess.
Hey, what if Tampa gets themselves into a corner? I think they might already be if they go and have to get Stamkos, and you could get like a guy like Cirelli who's got crazy term. Would you be doing that for 11? Like a deal with those kind of pieces in play? It's probably not 1-for-1, but
yeah, it depends, I guess, what else is involved. But that's the type of player, and probably around the level of player that you're looking for. And man, we gotta figure out, what does he have a no move? When does it
No, who's got a no move, interestingly, that comes up next season is Tanner Jeannot. Has 16-team modified no trade list that begins next season.
Yeah, some of these guys got to get them before that kicks in, right?
Damn right you do. Damn right you do.
Because 16 teams, they're going to be on every one of those.
I think Brady Tkachuk has a no move or something that kicks in next year too. Speaking of, plug in.
That would be. I don't know that anybody actually believes that they're going to get there with him, or that he's going to get there with the Senators, but you never know. You never know. Jack Eichel got traded. People didn't think that was going to happen. And
no shit.
Question would be, if you can start, if you're Brady Tkachuk and you can start pulling those levers and trying to force your way out, is this where A, Ottawa would want to send you, and B, that Brady Tkachuk would want to go? He did seem pretty excited to play that game in what is now Highmark Stadium back in the day when he was
yelling, he was hooting out Bill's Mafia
Juniors. He was a big fan of that, so maybe he would like it more than we think.
Thoughts on Boone Jenner from Tim Schizler? Love him.
Big fan. I say, if you need throw the 11th pick into a deal that includes Boone Jenner, that's okay with me, I think.
Brisebois said he ain't trading Cirelli. Did he really say ain't, James Campbell?
That would be good.
That seems like a word that an NHL general manager wouldn't say. Ain't? I love James Campbell. Soupy, as I call him. No, there's going to be a lot of this going on. We get through the draft, and the free agency is going to be right on our faces, right there. But there were some other things I wanted to get to, and I can't remember what they were now. We're already at $1:20 in here, man, and it flew by. And it wouldn't be a Baker Fairburn hockey show with a little hoot for Mitch. Let's go there back, and Mitch, our favorite custodial engineer, always has the best emojis in his chats. Still to this day, the only Baker Fairburn Hockey Show listener to fire up a super chat, by the way. I have it framed on my fridge.
That's true. I
It's a
remember
warning.
that.
It's a warning shot to all of
That
you.
was a big day. The
Pitching
only
this
other thing in
competition.
our pre-show rundown that I guess is worth mentioning that we talked about on the phone earlier is that Florida has not been putting Ryan Lomberg in their lineup very often
Oh yeah, man.
lately. So listeners of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show know that Ryan Lomberg is a favorite off-season target for that fourth line. And so if you're into that sort of thing, he hasn't been playing, and that's usually a nice sign that maybe he'll want to see what's out there and get some money if the Sabres want to throw a little bit extra at him. So
thank you for
it,
putting that back on the record on this show, because you and I agree on that 100%. If Kevin Adams was to go out and get a quote unquote asshole, that would be probably number one on the list if that's what he was shopping for. If he was going down that aisle,
right?
the asshole aisle,
Ryan Lomberg would be sitting on the shelf for sure, and
he
he
might
would
be.
be. He hasn't gotten a payday. He hasn't really gotten, a spot where he can have a truly consistent role. So I think the fact that his role is waning a little bit here is worth, you could say that it's not a great sign that he can't stay in the lineup, but I also say it's not a bad thing that maybe he'll want to explore his options. Jeff mentions that his ride or die free agent is DeBrusk, and I like
Yeah,
DeBrusk
down with
also.
that.
Before David says William Carrier, we're gonna have to do a whole show on maybe a back and forth
Oh,
with the
Deets.
chatters on some of
Oh,
these options.
that's a love
We
language of mine, William Carrier. There was we used to have arguments way back, like Hockey Hotline days. There was a gentleman that was working for WGR at the time, who will remain nameless, that said William Carrier will never be an NHL player. And I almost lost my mind. And I still think about that every time I see him play, and he's out there, working the board, sticking his ass out, blocking guys off, protecting the puck, kicking it to a teammate, just doing little plays like that, hitting guys. It's like never going to be an NHL player. Like, I hated that comment. It just sticks with me. And by the way, we got to get Jeremy White on the show too, because I was in the middle of the night going to the bathroom or something like that. I grabbed my phone. He was talking about like he would do the tank all over again.
yes, I saw
I
that.
did. I stayed away from that. Like, I was going to text him, like, are you out of your mind, man? We should talk about that. Jeremy knows that he and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum there, but let's not talk about that. Hey, we're a $1.20. Oh, go ahead. I know you got something to say. I can see it.
If anybody, all these names are coming up, and I think it'll be good to have a show where we get into all these. The tank we can get into at a different
I
time.
don't want
No,
to.
that would be another hour 20, I think. But I did throw together a list of bottom six type forwards and top six forwards, two separate posts at the Athletic. If people hadn't seen those, they are from a few weeks ago. But Carrier was on there, DeBrusk was on there, Lomberg was on there, Vogel was on there, as Brian Cummings mentions. So there are options. I think that I guess we should get out of here with a little Stanley Cup Finals prediction, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say let's go first of all, I got to flex a little bit. I had Bobby McIntyre last week, 75-1 on the PGA. It was a nice hit. I'm gonna
Who do you have this week?
Keegan. I got him at 60, and I bet a couple other guys that I bet Horschel at 70.
I bet Zalatoris at 70
I got him.
something. And
I got him in there.
I bet Thigala. That's not working out.
I'm an old Larry Bird fan, and I'm pulling for the Celtics in the NBA. I'm really worried about that Kyrie Luka connection get Dallas over the hump, but I love the Celtics. I don't know. Growing up in Massachusetts, I don't know if you have a lean on this one, so maybe you don't have to admit it. I'm worried about it though. I could see that one going 7.
Yeah,
and
it's been a fairly smooth road for the Celtics so far, so they're bound to There's a
Yeah.
lot of hand wringing in Boston over this Celtics team. They're a lightning rod for takes and hot takes over the way they play and everything, but I think they can finish the job. I admittedly don't watch a tremendous amount of basketball, but um,
And,
I tune in
and that,
now, right? Tune in the spring.
yeah, kill some time. And then lastly, in the NHL, you and I talked about this before. I thought it was going to be either Florida or Carolina. It was going to be one of those two that would come out of East and win the cup. I'm sticking with that. I would love to see Florida win the cup. I love the way that team is built. I love the way that team plays. So many people were dumping on them a couple years ago for Bobrovsky and the contract and why they draft Spencer Knight. And then he come back and, Bobrovsky's here. He's in the moment again. I'd like to see them do it. And I don't want to see Edmonton win the cup. I want to see another team that maybe never really, I mean, I don't know, Florida drafted high. They had Ekblad and they took Barkov, early in the 2013 draft and all that. It was many, many moons ago, but I just don't want to see Edmonton being so top heavy win. I want to see a team win. That's why I thought that Dallas would have maybe come out of the West and would have been the team that would have been given, Florida or Carolina a run for the money. Didn't see it happen because I think Dallas is a balanced team also. So if, Forsling can, body up on McDavid and makes that his assignment, I think they can win. I think we'll see the Rats flying.
We did the predictions before the season. They have us, fill out the form and get all the staff predictions at the Athletic. And I had Stars Rangers, so I clung to that, throughout the playoffs. But they came up a little bit short. My prediction in this one was Panthers in 6 because of Bobrovsky. I think the peak of Bobrovsky, if he can catch it in this in this series, is the difference maker. But I will just say that I think this is such a great Stanley Cup final matchup. Like it's a treat that Connor McDavid is here and has a chance at this, because it's really a historical thing for a player that will go down as one of, if not the best player. Certainly the best player of this generation. It'll be tough to catch 99, but he is he's special. So the more we get to watch him, and to get to watch him against a complete tough team like Florida with a fantastic goalie, it's going to be a fun series. Hopefully, you never know, but it looks like it'll be a pretty fun matchup. And Brian makes a good point here. The Sabres pick in the Okposo trade goes from a 7 to a 5 if they win the cup, and that's Kyle's main motivation.
100%.
He's trying to help out his old mates.
I think Dave Papaduke's talking about. Is this a reference to?
That is a follow up to this comment that he made, that USA beat Pakistan in cricket. Which
that is.
What
was the line on that?
It was a big upset, and so yeah, that was a big upset. I don't know.
Neil Kennington, a good friend of the show, by the way, as a Canadian, he says, "Go Oilers, go." I love the discourse from Myrtle and Sean McIndoe on Twitter about, Myrtle, I think, just kind of lighting that bomb and walking away. Is Edmonton now Canada's team? And the comments were pretty good. It was just roast fest. But I'll tell you what, when you were watching the Canadian Open over the weekend, where Bobby Mack won 75-1, everyone was kind of rallying around the Oilers, mostly because Colt Nost was there, doing the call on Saturday and Sunday. He's a Dallas Stars season ticket holder. He's wearing a Stars jersey because that's right before Game 7 on that Sunday. But it seemed like they were getting a lot of love from the Hamilton, Ontario golf viewing population.
You got Connor McDavid, right? This isn't like the Canucks or, it's Connor McDavid. I think Connor McDavid has his own fan base that, people who wouldn't want to just tune into Oilers games every night to watch that guy play. So it'll be fun. I mean, I know some people look at these, when it's a team like Florida, non-traditional market, but I will say, and nobody's crying tears for the people that have to travel back and forth to every Stanley Cup game, but man, Edmonton to Florida that's rough travel for these teams and anybody who's covering the series, on the broadcast, whatever. It's not a good draw. You always know West versus East, it's going to be something, but that's a tough one. That's about as far north and as far south as you can get.
Well, at least it's not Edmonton in January.
That's true. I like Edmonton.
Well, we are an hour and a half in. Matthew and I had a nice long break, but we didn't know what to expect tonight from the chat. It's really heartwarming to see as many people show up and join the fracas, as many of you did tonight. So we thank you for that. We're going to be more regular now, leading up to the draft and in free agency and coming up with our crazy ideas. I still have my really fun dream trade package scenario that I'm still building. It's like building a parlay. I'm still building that, working on that, going to refine that. But we'll be back pretty soon. Thanks again for hopping in. If you have questions for us, hit us up on Twitter. We'll get to them, maybe bake them into our next show sheet. We do have some things, my targets and kind of what I feel is realistic and what's not. We'll get to those next time, Matthew. Because there's another name that I love talking about that we will talk about. I think you probably see it there if you're looking at it. And I'm putting that one actually near the top of the list, actually, because I think it's very realistic. There's a little cliffhanger for everyone. But I think that's it. I'm not going to drone on. Matthew, can you do your plugs one last time?
Yes, you can go to theathletic.com/the Sabres and find me there. I should have a story in the coming days. I haven't written in a while because of my parental leave, but I'll be back on there with a steady stream of Sabres coverage. And you can find me on the various social platforms, but really just find me here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe, comment, like, rate us on Apple, help us move up the charts. We were at one time number 8. I don't think the charts liked our little hiatus here, so we got to climb back up, and we need the community to help us do it.
We are going to fix that. We're going to be back before you know it, everyone. My plug is I'm at Sabres Prospects on Twitter. You can find me there or any Mexican restaurant having shrimp tacos and tequila cocktail between now and the start of next season and probably beyond. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew who is enjoying one of those tequilas, I assume, out in my driveway in front of my house here, I'm Chris Baker. Thanks for hopping in, everyone. We'll see you again next time.